Welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast. I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Thank you for joining us as we uncover how stories are one of the most important aspects of your business. We'll talk about struggles, victories, and how you can utilize strategic storytelling to inspire those around you to action. Enjoy this episode. What if your team had a difficult time recognizing the difference between work and play? What if they focused on utilizing gamification to change the dynamics of your company culture? Today, I'm excited for this conversation because I am joined by Andrew Phelps, who's the co-founder and CEO of IncentivePilot, and he is the master of gamification. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us, and I'm fascinated with what you do for many, many reasons, some of which are a lot of business leaders right now are trying to figure out a way to change the workplace. Now, obviously, the workplace has been changed radically in the last couple of years. However, their teams are screaming to them, they want a different culture. They want to feel more fulfilled. They want to have more interaction from a team dynamics perspective. And a lot of what you do can accomplish that. So I want to talk about gamification. First, let's talk about the picture of gamification, because I think a lot of people listening might be thinking about it different with what you do. So can you talk a little bit about what you do at IncentivePilot regarding games?
Yeah, absolutely. So at IncentivePilot specifically, we build tools for engagement on massive scale. So enterprise sales teams with thousands of reps or channel programs with thousands of reps. Our tools are designed to get attention in a really crowded space and give less than a minute of play per day to the reps who interact with our tools. And it's a really effective way to get attention on important enablement. So promotional things, trainings, webinars, things that are outside of sales reps' normal duties that you really need to get their attention on in a short-term way. So that is our very narrow approach to gamification at IncentivePilot, but there's a million different ways that you can think about gamification at your business. And I think one of the things we're really passionate about, and I'm personally passionate about, is really lowering the bar and showing how easy it is to just add a little bit of gameplay to work and what a difference it makes. Because you've probably heard about gamification, and it's a buzzword. And like all buzzwords, there are thought leaders trying to argue for, what a deep and powerful tool it is that will solve all your problems. But like any other tool in the toolbox, that's not the case. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about gamification is that you have to turn work into play. And you have to trick the people you're working with that they're not working. And you have to engineer some system where people are having so much fun at work, they don't even know that they're at work, and that's sort of a utopian vision. I don't think that exists. And the questions I ask to our customers with that conception is, do you have a chore leaderboard at home? Do you give yourself points for flossing your teeth? That sort of thing. And of course, the answer is no. I don't do that. And it's the same with work. We all come to work. And even if you're passionate about what you do, it's still work. You still you're still trying to add value, and it's not always fun. And people are smart enough to know that and feel the difference. And so instead of trying to turn work into a game by adding points and making it, kind of layering the competition in a very literal way, my suggestion and our suggestion at IncentivePilot is just add a game to the mix. And if you do a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, or whenever you get people together, spend a few minutes playing a game. And what that does is open up a space where people are interacting with one another in a different way, and they're having fun, and they're thinking in a different way, and they're going to be able to connect in a different way. Because what happens is we go to work, we connect with our peers, we talk about our products, our services, our jobs, and we connect on all those things all the time. And you tend to get in a groove and you don't appreciate your peers as human beings, as creative contributors, as collaborators, because you're stuck with the mental image of what they are, who they are, what they do, and what they offer to the team. When you play a game or do creative exercises, like I can talk about with our team, is that different things from your real life pop up. Oh, I didn't know you were into mountain biking. That's so cool. Where do you go? Oh, really? You bake cakes? This, that's your answer? And people to connect in different ways, and it can reinvigorate the energy of a team, and it can help people just change the context, and open up that space for innovation. Because when we change the way we're interacting with each other, we change the way we can collaborate, and that's where new ideas bubble up. And when people are communicating better, that's when not only the ideas come, but people can start executing on innovation, because we connect in a new way. Hey, I was thinking that too. Let's meet next week and get that rolling, because we can save a bunch of time doing that, right? And helping people connect in other ways. So I think that's my long, short way of talking about how we approach gamification. I think where the most bang for your buck is just adding games to work in a very small way.
Sure. Yeah. So what you said, there's a lot to unpack. One of the things you had talked about was interacting. And I want people to really grab a hold of this because this is so powerful. So I had read years ago that Zappos, they were purchased by Amazon, but Zappos in their rise had a gamification element to their company's interactions. And it really created a company culture of storytelling. Because what happened, what you just said, Andrew, people were doing these games. They go to work, they start with a game. And really the game was to learn their colleagues on a much deeper level. And they learned, hey, Sally over here is really interested in this one nonprofit, and Bob over here is really interested in mountain climbing and things that they never knew before. And it really connected them on such an incredible level. And they were building these sound business relationships that it became this incredible dynamic team. And they were able to do incredible things. And the customer experience was Zappos. I don't know if anyone listening has purchased shoes from Zappos. The experience is second to none. It's incredible. And they were able to do it because of the experiences through conversations, through engagement, through storytelling that they did internally with the company. So engagement is absolutely huge. I appreciate you mentioning that. One of the things from a follow-up that I want to talk about is one of the big challenges a lot of leaders are experiencing is you have this gigantic wave of millennials coming on into leadership positions. So we've had this massive exodus of baby boomers right now in the marketplace retiring. You have a lot of millennials coming on board in leadership positions for VP level and above. And what's happening is a lot of them are screaming for fulfillment. They're screaming for purpose. They're trying to connect with the company, realizing that there's more than just doing work. There has to be some type of culture, some reason to engage with an organization. Have you found that what you do connects better with a different generation? Would you say millennials and Gen Z is more willing to adopt this than Gen Xers and baby boomers, or have you not seen that difference?
I haven't seen that difference. No, I think everybody,
Wow. Okay.
everybody likes playing games. I think maybe some of the, I'm thinking that maybe the stereotypes for millennials and Gen Z, there might be some truth to is that they're open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. And so maybe that conception of turning work into play that, goes along with the buzzword, maybe goes along with that stereotype better. But people want to connect with one another. It doesn't matter who you are, what your age is, what you look like. People want to connect with one another. And that is one of the downsides of everyone going remote. We've talked about the data is very clear. There doesn't seem to be a loss of productivity with people working from home. But you know what? There is a loss of that connectivity. There's so much that happens at an office just by the nature of people working alongside one another and the osmosis of ideas and fun, right? So when you jump on a Zoom call, there's that super small delay of call and response. It's not the same as being in person, and how you interact is differently, and it's less natural. And I think we can all agree on that. And with that small barrier, of removing that natural interaction, you're missing out on all those jokes that someone leans over to tell their coworker in the middle of a meeting. You're missing out on those shared moments of creativity looking at the same computer screen. You're missing out on bumping into your person, your favorite person from another department coming down the hall. And you're losing just the serendipity and the energy of being in an office. When everyone came into the office for our Friday meetings before we went remote, it was just like a buzz in the room. People are talking about what they're doing that weekend. It's like, getting people calmed down to start the meeting, was a problem, and it was a wonderful problem. But that was like, okay, we got to get going here, folks. And you don't have that online. Everyone's signing on. You can't feel the energy, the vibes, whatever word you want to use, you can't feel it from your other teammates over a Zoom call. And so with that missing, I think everybody's looking for a way to replace that very natural sharing of energy and connection. And with that, that's a massive hole to fill. And the company has to fill that hole. A lot of this work satisfaction we got from being in the trenches with our coworkers is just gone. And that's just because we're not sitting next to each other. And so it's not on the employees to try to replace that. It's on the companies to try to replace that.
Sure. That's a really good point. I read an article, this was several months ago, but I found it fascinating. And the article is talking about Google and how when Google went remote, they saved a ton of money. Not surprising to anyone listening to this. But what fascinated me in the article was how quickly Google wanted people to come back and why they were so heavily investing on people coming back. Because Google didn't necessarily care about the savings of money. They were really concerned because they were losing out on massive profits because of the lack of creativity. And this goes back to your point, when you have people together and they're connecting, there's a massive surge of creativity because they're sharing different stories that they wouldn't have shared over a virtual platform. This is how Google is able to be so stinking innovative. This is one of the reasons why Gmail came about, was because a coworker realized that there was a need in that space, and they were sharing stories about how can we be more innovative with email, and Gmail was birthed based on that connecting and creativity. So it's amazing. Like, you're reading this article and yes, they saved a ton of money, but the creativity was so restricted that they need to figure out a way to bring people back to have that connectivity. So can you talk about gamification from a creative perspective? What does this do to team members from an innovative perspective? Have you seen where teams start to adopt the different things that you do and they have this surge of creativity?
Absolutely. So I think what's important to understand is actually on the neuroscience level, right? We all do things that we are very habituated to do, and we go into autopilot to do them. And our jobs are a huge piece of that. And it's really important our brains work this way, because if you had to think really hard about everything that you do, we would be exhausted all the time, right? If you had to think really hard about driving, then just going to the store would be exhausting, because it would be like the first time you're behind the wheel. So our brains are very effective at habituating tasks we do over and over and over again. But the trade-off there is that when we're doing that, the conscious brain isn't really there, and it's not analyzing the problems in the same way. And so people get into autopilot when they go to work. And when we worked together back in the office, it was much easier for us to naturally break out and switch between the habituated actions where we're not really paying attention, or paying attention with a different part of our brain, to, oh, hey, what's that on that screen? Right. Running a design studio for 10 years, that's what we happen in the office. You walk by someone's desk, they got 3 monitors, and you're like, whoa, what's that? What is that one you're working on? And that's not the stuff that we see them share in the meeting. Right. And that serendipity of, okay, tell me about this idea. Oh, okay. Well, I had this idea, but it's not really working because of X, Y, Z. Well, I think this idea spanks the pants off the ones you presented in the meeting. And have you tried this? Oh my gosh, that fixes it. So you get that creativity and that collaboration by seeing things not people wanted you to see, but you just happen to see by being in the same vicinity. So going back to the question of how gamification can help with that, again, adding a game to work or adding a creative exercise to work is forcing people to shift out of that habituating work practice and pay attention to problems in new ways. And simply switching the gears once a week for a few minutes will start to build people's muscle, and they'll start to naturally introduce some of that creative thinking along the way. So I really think the power of gamification right here, right now, is just the ability for games to switch the way we think, so we can tackle problems in a new way. And it's also proven with neuroscience principles that we remember the most when we're emotionally heightened. And games are a great way to make something interesting and fun, and will contribute to how people are learning new things and new ways to solve problems as they play games.
Yeah, so that's all very fascinating to me. And I wasn't really mindful of it until you're mentioning this, that it's the disruption within our day-to-day that gets us out of our normal habitual state to have different thoughts that we wouldn't have actually had if it wasn't for that disruption that can lead to that creativity. So I'm very interested in that concept, because you're so right, is that we tend to drive the same route. If we're going physically somewhere, we drive the same route to work. We have the same habits a lot of times, and we want to stick to those habits. We want to feel comfortable, but yet being comfortable doesn't lead to that creativity. So I really appreciate you mentioning that's fascinating to me. I want to talk a little bit more about the trainings and webinars. In the beginning, you talked about how this can add to trainings. So in 2019, especially in the United States, it was the biggest training and development year on record in the history of the country. 2019, the companies were pumping astronomical amount of funding into training. Actually, we had more conferences in the United States than we had ever had before. People coming, they're learning. And then everyone knows what happens in 2020. It took a nosedive, and a lot of companies were pulling back from their training and development budgets because they didn't want to heavily invest when it came to Zoom trainings. And there are some companies that were still doing that, absolutely. But you can see, if you were looking at a chart, you would see 2019 skyrocketing with investing in people. 2020 took a complete nosedive, complete 180. And then what happened? People were fleeing companies left and right, and business leaders are screaming, how am I going to win the talent war? Because people aren't feeling like they're being developed. They don't feel like the organizations that they're working for actually care about them. So I'm interested to talk more about the training and webinar and development piece. So how could this bring back training to the workplace? Right now, we are seeing a surge of trainings. Right now, companies are catching on that we have to actually develop our people. So what is a way that this can take a potentially okay training and spice it up a little bit to be more engaging?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of experts in, the best way to do virtual presentations and the science behind getting and maintaining attention along the course of a presentation or a training. And I would look at games as an option of the many options to engage people, right? There's jokes, there's memes, there's all sorts of ways to keep people's attention. And I think the thread that runs through all of them, including games, is it's just a way to shift gears from working to playing. It's about connecting on a human level. So the brain makes the switch, feels something, and the attention is a little bit higher as the training continues. So I saw a wonderful presentation this week at B2BMX conference that was here in Phoenix. And it was all about the neuroscience of presentation with, oh man, I'm going to blank on the name drop here. We'll include it in the notes with the show, so I can give credit where credit is due. But one of the things that stuck with me from that presentation was how you design engagement along the way to make sure people are still engaging in the middle of the presentation, because you get a hammock-like shape of attention, a lot of attention at the beginning, a lot of attention at the end, and not so much in the middle. So the ways you can kind of spike attention along the way. But the nugget I thought was so interesting was it's a misconception that we don't like complex things. Our brains only like simple things. And it's actually the opposite. Our brains like the right level of complexity. If it's too simple, we don't pay attention. And if it's confusing, we don't pay attention. But complex things that can be understood are very powerful to gain attention and facilitate that learning. And that's been something I've been reflecting on a lot just the last day since I saw that presentation. I thought it was really interesting, and it was a new nugget for me. So I think thinking about the spikes of engagement along with the right level of complexity to keep people stimulated will be really important as we design our trainings and education for the future.
Great. Fantastic. We've covered a lot so far. So we talked about how you can utilize gamification for interacting. We had talked about creativity. We had talked about training. And I had mentioned how you could really use this as a component to create a company culture of storytelling, that you're going to have this surge of stories. A lot of your team members are going to have more problem and solution minded interactions and connections. And a lot of people listening to this may think from a theoretical perspective, that sounds good. It sounds good, Andrew. I'm on board with you. I understand the importance, but where do they go from here? If a leader wants to do something, they want to start implementing this, they have no idea where to start. Where would you recommend they start to get this rolling?
Well, I think like anything else at your company, you got to find a champion who is into the idea, right? This is about fun, and it's not about faking having fun. And so you got to find someone who loves the idea of injecting a little bit of fun and make them responsible for the fun. And we have a wonderful team with a lot of great ideas, but we have one amazing master of fun at IncentivePilot named Tyler. Every week he comes up with a new creative challenge that the team tries to tackle. It can be, your Shark Tank pitch for a fake product that you've been assigned. It can be a new sport you have to invent the rules for, or a twist on something. The one we did at Thanksgiving that I was almost in tears laughing at was, you're on your way to Thanksgiving and you get a last minute call that you have to bring a dish, and the only place to stop is the gas station. So what are you making with your, convenience store, grocery aisle, as a Thanksgiving meal? So, those sorts of things. But I think finding that champion whose personality and passion are already aligned with this sort of thing, and leaning on them and saying, hey, we're going to take 15 minutes of this meeting to play a game. It can be an icebreaker. It can be, an online game, depending on your team size, like a Jackbox game. Not all those are appropriate for all work environments, but I think it is probably important to find the line of professionalism for your team and go right up to the edge of it, because you want people to interact in ways that they're not usually interacting, and don't want to do anything make people uncomfortable or inappropriate. But you can really walk the line of, wait, this is fun. This is more like hanging out at home than it is at work. And again, that's not every day. That's not all day. That's not on their most important calls. But for 10 minutes a week or something like that, it can make a powerful difference. So find a champion who wants to make this happen, and you won't have to worry about another thing. They're going to take care of it because it's who they are.
That is an awesome response. Find someone who wants to have fun in your organization. It is probably mind-boggling how few business leaders have actually thought that before. But yet a lot of people are continuing to talk about, how do we change our company culture from having people look for the nearest exit to actually want to be here? What a great way is to find a champion, to find someone that wants to have fun and change the organization for the better. And just to show people just the power of this. So you were talking, Andrew, about, you're on your way to Thanksgiving dinner, and even in that scenario, there are people that are going to listen to this thinking, what does that have to do with business? I understand fun and the culture, but what kind of applicable business skills could that bring? I remember an organization a couple of years ago, I actually did a training for them, and they did something similar where they basically they had a few hours that they blocked off on a regular basis, and everyone stood up and they gave these really random left field ideas, and people had to present on them for 2 minutes. And what happened was their presentation skills among their sales reps skyrocketed because they were able to talk in front of people about anything. Because if you can talk about some of the things that you had talked about in a funny capacity and in a very weird, interesting way, then you're going to knock your sales presentation out of the park. So I think that there is a way to identify this as actually being applicable to actual business goals. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And I want people to recognize that. So let's say they find this person that actually wants to have fun. Then where do they go from there? What would be the next step? Do they come up with a goal on how they're going to implement it? What do you recommend that they do after they actually find that ambassador, that fun ambassador, if you will?
Yeah, I would just come up with what you're comfortable with. And I can't stress enough that a tiny amount will make a huge difference. So let's say, hey, we're going to take 10 minutes of, the team meetings or the smaller team meetings every Friday, and we're going to do a fun little exercise. And for us, it would be, Tyler, come up with something we're going to do for the next, something different we're going to do on the next 3 Fridays, and let us know what they are beforehand, just so we can give you a thumbs up. And 99% of the time we give Tyler a thumbs up, and it's fun. And I think it's that simple. And I think, like any experiment, you have to feel out what the right amount of time is. You don't want to do it once. You're not going to see any improvement there. And you probably don't want to say, we're going to do this exactly this way for a year, because if it's not working, that's an overcommitment too. So maybe a quarter, right? Hey, for 10 minutes on certain meetings, we're going to make space for some fun or creative exercises this quarter, and we're going to see what happens. And just jumping back to your point for the business case is that it's really hard to come up with metrics for culture. One of the best ones I've heard is from Sean Went over at Postscript. He said, one of your KPIs is how many inside jokes your team has, because you can't fake it. You can't force inside jokes. People make them up on their own. And so how connected they are the inside jokes that happen. And, something like the Thanksgiving gas station Thanksgiving meal exercise, that is just, a fertile ground for inside jokes, because then people are connecting in different ways. Like, oh, you like Funyuns? I like Funyuns. And that becomes something they connect on. And so those deeper connections that will foster communication during the rest of the week, right? Matt, you and I don't know each other very well. This is our first conversation. But if for 3 weeks, we're forced to kind of have fun and connect on some different things, then maybe in week 4 we're in a meeting together, and I feel comfortable pitching an idea to you that I wouldn't feel comfortable before, right? Sure. And so that connection really does foster creativity and innovation, because people feel more connected. They feel safer to share ideas. And when they feel safer to share ideas, you get more good ideas.
Sure. I really like what you said about metrics for culture, that there really aren't that many metrics, but inside jokes really ties in to the fabric of an organization. If they've been together, they've had those conversations, they've shared those stories, whether they're personal or business, they're going to build inside jokes and they're going to feel more connected. It's so fascinating that you say this, because the other day I was speaking to an organization, I was doing a workshop for them on strategic storytelling. And it was interesting hearing all the inside jokes that they had. Like, it was incredible. Like, they had been together. So some of these individuals started off as interns, and then they became VPs of the company. So they've been there for years. They built a massive organization that's doing a lot of good impact in the world. And it was interesting to hear different jokes come up that they had experienced together years ago, but it's something that they remember, and it immediately takes them back to an experience. And that visualization is so important too, because if you're going through an experience with a team member that's exciting, just having that inside joke you talked a little bit more about the psychology, can bring them back to that moment where they feel excited, visualizing what had happened. So this is so powerful. And I don't want people to miss the importance of creating this company culture of interacting, of connecting, of developing. I think all of that ties very nicely into what you do. And there was so much that we had talked about and we had unpacked. I think a lot of people got a lot of good out of this. If anyone listening to this wants more information, they want to understand more about what you do, Andrew, where would you point them to? What's the best way that they can connect with you?
Yeah, I'm getting really active on LinkedIn. So just hit me up on LinkedIn and we'll get connected.
Perfect. Okay. I'll absolutely include your LinkedIn link in the show notes. People could just click, connect, follow you on LinkedIn. And I will also put a plug in for this. I've seen Andrew's content, very thought provoking. It really gets people out of their normal thought process when it comes to games. So highly recommend people connect with Andrew on LinkedIn. Again, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. We covered a lot of ground. I think it's going to be invaluable to a lot of people. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing from individuals that listen to this and what gamification did for them.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email to matt@mattzaun.com with the subject line Stories with Traction. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share tons of resources on how you can be a better storyteller. Remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.